Every high holiday season, I have shared 4 distinct standalone sermons, each sermon focused on a topic that I explored and commented upon, ending with a suggestion and a prayer. But as I explained yesterday, this year is different. 3 of my sermons this year are really one long excursus on the topic of fear and anxiety. I shared with you yesterday morning the sense of dread with which I have been living. I explained my understanding that American values are being threatened and how I think we can begin to confront that fear. Today, I want to delve a little deeper. I want to share with you one factor that I think exacerbates that fear, meaning that the fear doesn't just stem from actions that have been taken and events that have occurred. The fear doesn't just stem from policies and executive orders. Rather, the fear is based on the way in which these policies have been explained and promoted. The fear is based on the way people on both sides of the aisle and in our society in general have been talking to one another. The fear stems from the way in which people have forgotten what it means to have civil discourse. In 1858, the people of Illinois had to choose between Senator Stephen Douglas and former Congressman Abraham Lincoln to be their next representative in the United States Senate. Douglas was the 2-term incumbent Democrat, and Lincoln was the Republican candidate who had served 1 term as a congressman a few years prior. That summer and fall, after each spoke in the state capital, Springfield, and in the state's largest city, Chicago, they agreed to debate 7 more times in cities around the state. An average of at least 10,000 people attended each debate, with one drawing about 18,000 people. Even though it was a state senatorial campaign, the debates drew national attention and were covered by newspapers across the country, thanks to the new invention of the telegraph, because the prevailing topic in each debate was slavery. In each debate, either Douglas or Lincoln would open with an hour-long address. The other would then speak for an hour and a half. The first then had 30 minutes of rebuttal. Imagine paying attention and being in the audience for that long. In the 7 debates, Douglas, as the incumbent, was allowed to go first 4 times. Despite the fact that the topic was controversial, the candidates admitted that each other was intelligent. They focused on issues and not each other's personality, and they seriously debated what was an aspect in the slavery debate known as popular sovereignty. They were deferential to one another and seriously debated the issue without attacking each other. In 1858, when civil war was about to ensue, at a time of great hostility and hatred pervading American society, Douglas and Lincoln set the example of civility and respect. 102 years later, Vice President Richard Nixon and Senator John Kennedy participated in the first ever televised presidential debates. 4 times in the fall of 1960, Nixon and Kennedy debated the issues of the day. In 1960, the American population was about 180 million. At least 60 million Americans watched each of the debates, with the first debate drawing 66 million viewers. The candidates in the first debate only were permitted 8-minute opening statements, and in every debate, the candidates were questioned by journalists and allowed to answer for 2.5 minutes at a time. In 1960, America was in the midst of the Cold War, with an active and constant threat of nuclear attack. And at the same time, America's involvement in Vietnam was just beginning. It was an anxious time, yet the candidates stayed on point and debated the issues. Never did they allow themselves to be reduced to what we would call gutter politics. There was no name-calling or personal attacks. There was, instead, a civil tone between Nixon and Kennedy personally in all 4 debates. In 1858, American society was being torn apart over slavery. Rabbis debated whether Jewish law permitted or prohibited slavery. It was a fraught and heated time, yet Douglas and Lincoln were respectful and civil in debate with each other. In 1960, American students were already used to practicing duck and cover drills in school. The Russian nuclear threat was real, and there was debate on how best to combat the Russians. It was a fraught and heated time, yet Kennedy and Nixon were able to maintain respect for one another throughout their debates. In 2011, the University of Arizona created the National Institute for Civil Discourse on its campus as a direct result of the shooting in Tucson of Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. The Institute teaches that there are several key factors that are essential in maintaining civil discourse. They say, quote, engaging in conversations across the divide opens doors to finding common ground and moves our country toward a more perfect union. Our programs convey several key principles and best practices that are critical to connecting across divides, including empathy instead of vitriol, listening for understanding instead of hearing to overpower, and humility instead of all-knowing. With this in mind, that is, the examples of arguably the 2 most famous debates in the history of our country, and the definition of civil discourse, I want to share with you one last example that articulates my fear. Last January, Bishop Marianne Edgar Budde, who is the Episcopal Bishop of Washington, gave a sermon during the service at the Washington National Cathedral that was held to celebrate the presidential inauguration. She had a daunting task. Her mission was not only to pray for the success of the newly elected and inaugurated president and his administration, but also to provide words of meaning and blessing to him and the congregation. Based in Scripture, verses from the book of Matthew, Bishop Budde decided to preach about unity. Unity in order to rise above division, and unity to strive for honesty, dignity, and humility. Here are some of her inspiring words. Those of us gathered here in this cathedral are not naive about the realities of politics. When power, wealth, and competing interests are at stake, when views of what America should be are in conflict, when there are strong opinions across a spectrum of possibilities and starkly different understandings of what the right course of action is, there will be winners and losers when votes are cast or decisions made that set the course of public policy and the prioritization of resources. It goes without saying that in a democracy, not everyone's particular hopes and dreams will be realized in a given legislative session or a presidential term or even a generation. Not everyone's specific prayers, for those of us who are people of prayer, will be answered as we would like. But for some, the loss of their hopes and dreams will be far more than political defeat, but instead a loss of equality, dignity, and livelihood. Given this, is true unity among us even possible? She asked. And why should we care about it? Well, I hope that we care because the culture of contempt that has become normalized in our country threatens to destroy us. We are all bombarded daily with messages from what sociologists now call the outrage industrial complex, some of it driven by external forces whose interests are furthered by a polarized America. Contempt fuels our political campaigns and social media, and many profit from it. But it's a dangerous way to lead our country. After this daring and unambiguous introduction, in which she described what she felt the nature of discourse is in this country, she proceeded to explain that 3 elements are required if unity is to be achieved. She said that each person needs to honor the dignity of every other person in this country. She said our conversations need to be honest and true, based on facts and not misinformation. And she said we always need to be humble. We need to understand that we, by our very nature, are fallible. Humility allows us to recognize our faults and our desire to improve. Then Bishop Buddy concluded with these words: "Let me make one final plea, Mr. President. Millions have put their trust in you. As you told the nation yesterday, you have felt the providential hand of a loving God. In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are transgender children in both Republican and Democratic families who fear for their lives. Have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear that their parents will be taken away. Help those who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own lands to find compassion and welcome here. Our God teaches us that we are to be merciful to the stranger, for we were once strangers in this land. May God grant us," she concluded, "all the strength and courage to honor the dignity of every human being, speak the truth in love, and walk humbly with one another and our God for the good of all people of this nation and the world." Bishop Buddy didn't suggest that the president wasn't going to act this way. She didn't suggest that the president himself was fear-mongering. She did, however, remind the president and the audience that there are biblical views that should guide our actions. She did ask that the president be merciful and compassionate. She did not attack or insult him, but rather strongly shared her opinion of how she thought a president should act. Later that very day, the president reacted to this speech on his social media platform. He sharply criticized the so-called bishop as a radical left hardline Trump hater. He continued, she brought her church into the world of politics in a very ungracious way. She was nasty in tone and not compelling or smart. And finally, he said, apart from her inappropriate statements, the service was a very boring and uninspiring one. She is not very good at her job. And he concluded, she and her church owe the public an apology. I share this exchange with you not to get into politics and not to criticize the president, but instead to highlight the deplorable state our national dialogue has been reduced to. Our culture is based so much on social media, and social media, as the bishop described it, is really an outrage industrial complex. That means that many people see that the point of posting pictures, videos, or words is to garner attention. The more attention, the more influence. The more views on YouTube or TikTok also means more money. That's right, people who are called influencers are paid for their posts. Some people most of us never heard of have millions of followers, and many of those people get their views by doing and saying outrageous things. People feel free to post because they can, because no one is stopping them. And they feel they can post whatever they want, in whatever way they want. They can scream, rant, and rave, and the platform doesn't stop them. There's no filter for the outrage and outcries posted on social media. This anger carries over into personal encounters as well. So often on news channels on TV, guest panelists often end up yelling at each other or talking over each other or even insulting each other. The more we're online, the more we post unfiltered, outrageous comments, the more likely it is that our in-person encounters will be the same. The anger may come from a place of pain. Some people may feel as if they've been insulted or their grievances haven't been heard. They yell out of frustration and hope that maybe they can be heard and maybe someone will solve their problem. And sometimes people yell in order to reiterate that they are right and how dare anyone claim otherwise. They feel their position is the only position anyone could have, and no one should be allowed to have any other opinion. No matter what the cause, this unfiltered, high-volume method of communication has done damage to our society. As I alluded to yesterday, there are many factors at play causing me to be seized with fear and trembling. The fact that people have forgotten how to have respectful conversations has caused tremendous damage to our civil society and has exacerbated my fear. We are in synagogue today at the holiest season of the year in order to fulfill a spiritual task. Entering into the spirit of Rosh Hashanah means we are attempting to dialogue with God and to dialogue with our conscience in an honest, dignified, and humble way. But I fear that this task has become increasingly difficult. To combat the way civil discourse has slowly disappeared in our society, we need to take a lesson from the language and choreography of our liturgy. Our Machzor contains many examples of how we address God in prayer. The words are formal. The rabbis wrote the words for us so that we learn how to address God. There isn't much room for improvisation, nor does the traditional liturgy allow us to compose our own words. By writing the words for us, the rabbis teach us the correct way to talk to God. That way promotes the idea that we are not equal to God. We are human beings. God is supreme and eternal. We are created by God. God is the creator of the universe. We are the subjects. God is the sovereign. Through the liturgy, these ideas are expressed and reinforced so that we learn to be humble. The words of these high holiday services should also apply to the way we talk to our loved ones, to our friends, and even to total strangers. A basic principle of Judaism is that all of God's creation contains a spark of divinity. All human beings are created in the image of God. Therefore, we have no choice but to recognize there is something divine in each and every human being. Recognizing that spark causes us then to strive for the 3 points that Bishop Buddy taught in her sermon and the principles of the National Institute of Civil Discourse. Namely, if we know that every human being is holy, then we have no choice but to treat everyone with dignity and respect. How we act and what we say must reflect the honor that the other person deserves. The spark of holiness also means that we have to be honest and truthful in what we say and how we act. Spewing lies and spreading misinformation would be blasphemous in the presence of holiness. Seeing the divinity in the other person requires us to show respect by being honest and truthful. Anything less would diminish the other. And seeing the face of God in the other person should instinctively cause us to be humble. We don't need to travel to the Grand Canyon or Niagara Falls to recognize the beauty of God's creation. We see it every day when looking at the trees and the sky. So too when we encounter other human beings. Each and every one of us is a reflection of God. When we can acknowledge that, then we can begin to express dignity, honesty, and humility in everything we do and everything we say. Even more importantly, if we can learn how to return to civil discourse, then perhaps one conversation at a time, we can make a difference. It takes effort to relearn these skills. It takes energy to think about what to say and how to say it. But when we do so, we begin to make a difference. And just maybe, we can begin to alleviate the tension and fear in our lives and begin instead to feel love and respect. Amen.